I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. What makes an idea or person truly remarkable? Guy Kawasaki has spent decades evangelizing some of the world's most influential brands, from Apple to Canva, and helping ideas spread in ways that stick. In his new book, Wiser Guy, he shares the lessons, stories, and wisdom he's gathered along the way, showing how to think remarkable, lead with purpose, and make an impact that lasts. My interview with Guy Kawasaki is coming right up. But first,
are you tired of juggling multiple software tools to manage your agency? Say hello to Deltek Workbook, the ultimate solution for marketing and communication agencies. With Workbook, you can streamline your projects, resources, and finances all in one place. Imagine real-time dashboards and reports giving you full visibility into your projects, people, and financials. Plan your team's capacity weeks in advance to avoid bottlenecks while staying on budget to maximize project margins. Plus, Workbook works perfectly for both agencies and in-house marketing teams looking to boost efficiency and profitability. And here's the best part. At PCI, we're a certified Deltek partner and reseller offering expert implementation, integrations, and ongoing support to ensure your success. Want to see how Deltek Workbook can transform your operations? For a free consultation, visit pci.us/podcast today. That's pci.us/podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Guy Kawasaki, welcome back to On Brand.
Yeah. I got to tell you, man, that was really a great intro. And the listeners may not understand this, but that was the first take. And there's only going to be one take. Wow. Like when I do intros for my podcast, I do 15 or 20 takes. I swear sometimes.
I was going to say, especially when it's that all-important intro, it's that small soundbite. You want to get it right. And, thank you.
Did you practice that before? Or this is like you just let it rip?
I did practice it. I read it a couple times before you and I got on. And then when I was getting ready this morning, I had it on my phone, and I just didn't want to trip over a word. So,
jeez, I have had guests where they identify as they, and I keep referring to them as she in the intro. And I have it written right in front of me on a teleprompter. There's no female pronoun, but I
well, and then the when I say someone's name wrong, because I do video now, and I used to go back if I got someone's name wrong, I'd go back, but now I feel like I try to get it right going out of the gate. So it's not always pretty.
I just interviewed Sharon McMahon, and her name is spelled McMahon. So, everybody must be saying Sharon McMahon, but right? But she's not the wrestling McMahon. She's the teaching McMahon. Anyway.
Okay. Well, I thank you for that. And, it's actually leads me back to the book, because one of the many lessons that you impart there is not being too late with gratitude. So you're practicing what you preach. You came right out of the gate with gratitude. But the other thing, speaking of out of the gate, you say very early on that the book's not meant to be a memoir. So. Yeah. Start there. What is the book, and what made you write it now?
Well, the book is a collection of stories from my 71-year-old life. And the reason why Wise Guy became Wiser Guy is because between Wise Guy and Wiser Guy, I started a podcast. And in that podcast, I've had 300 remarkable guests. So I got a lot more stories to add. And so, yeah, that was basically why Wise Guy became Wiser Guy.
Well, and I would say too, I think sometimes, it's the announcement of it's not a memoir, but I think it's something, and you alluded to this with the stories from the folks that you've interviewed. It's kind of something more than that, because it's using your stories, your guest stories, to teach some of these big lessons.
Yeah.
Did you have those in your head, or did they self-identify for you in looking at all of these conversations?
I think that they basically rose to the top after a lot of boiling. And let me specifically address this concept of a memoir. So, if you're Jane Goodall, you can have a memoir. If you're Nelson Mandela, you can have a memoir. If you're Barack Obama, you can have a memoir. But Guy Kawasaki, I don't think so. I don't, in a rare moment of modesty, let me say that I don't think my life merits a memoir. That's a little too bullshit for me. So, if you ever see a memoir from Guy, it's because I've lost my mind.
So on the book front, you've been a proponent of self-publishing and of self-published works, and went the traditional route with this one. How has the publishing landscape changed, and what made you go the traditional route this time?
Yeah, I've gone, well. I don't know if you're ready for this answer, but when you ask an author, why did you write this book? If the author is honest, the answer is a big advance. But well, I have self-published and I have published, and honestly, the times I published with a traditional publisher, I got a big advance. And the time I didn't. And although I have a very good publishing story for you, right now I'm working on my, God only knows, upteenth book.
It's a memoir.
No, it's not a memoir. It's the antithesis of a memoir. So I am writing a book called Everybody Has Something to Hide, Why and How to Use Signal. Because I think signal is essential for the preservation of the American democracy. And so this book was almost going to be Signal for Dummies, because the Dummy series is from Wiley, and Wiley is the publisher of Wiser Guy and Think Remarkable. But you'll love this story. So I told them that I wanted to have a cover price of $17.76, which makes perfect sense, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they told me that all for Dummies book end in 99 cents. And I said, well, did Moses tell you that? Did God tell you that? Did Buddha tell you that? Who told you that? Like, where is it written in the sky or in the Bible or in, whatever Quran that your prices have to end with 99 cents? And they said, nope, that's how it works. So I walked away from a deal for Signal for Dummies for 23 cents.
Oh, 23 cents. That's
it all adds up. But, seriously. So now, not only is the cover price going to be $17.76, which I'm going to self-publish with Kindle. So that is an Easter egg, and, people will get it. They'll understand what the message is. So that's story number one. And story number two is I can tell this story how I walked away for 23 cents. I'm like, I know as a podcaster that, you want to open up with something like an interesting story, and it doesn't get much more interesting than that. Than asking the author, like, why did you write this book?
Oh, so on the front, I thought the story was going to be that they didn't want to go from wiser guy on selling wisdom to dummies. That there was a brand disconnect there. But of the lessons in Wiser Guy, you talked about bringing it all to a boil. Was there a story or a piece of advice that that surprised you along the way as it surfaced?
The In a sense, almost every story is like that. That not necessarily surprising, but listen, I'm 71 years old. I got a lot of stories, and there's a lot that didn't make it into the book. Okay, so I'm highly selective on stories. But one of the stories that was in Wise Guy and is in Wiser Guy is the story of my father and I. And so my wife and I and first child, we were living in San Francisco in the Presidio, which is a very nice part of San Francisco. And one day I was outside cutting the bougainvillea tree and plant or hedge or whatever. And this older white woman comes up to me and says, "Do you do lawns too?" And I just had to laugh. And I said, "I'm Japanese, so you think that I must be the yard man, right?" She goes, "No, no, no. You're just doing a great job. I just wanted to know if you do lawns." And so, you might think the punchline of this story is about racial profiling. But no, that's a subtext. So a few weeks later, my father comes and visits me. I tell him this story. I expect him to be all pissed off that his son, who went to Stanford and worked for Apple and has written, over a dozen books, blah, blah, blah. How dare she ask you if you're the yard man just because you're Japanese? And to my utter amazement, he says, "Son, statistically, a Japanese guy cutting a hedge in the Presidio is the yard man. So just chillax. Don't get all upset. Don't look for problems. Maybe she just wanted someone to cut her lawn. And even if you were white, she might have asked you." So that's the day I learned to, don't go look for problems, because enough problems are going to find you. Give people the benefit of the doubt, take the high road, use humor, don't get all upset and go into Karen mode and, all that. I don't ever want to be on a YouTube video, look at this guy going all Karen.
Well, and I think that was near a part in the book that really resonated with me. I think I was looking back, and you were one of the early guests on this show in 2016, and you talked about your hearing challenges and how that made podcast work difficult because it relied on real-time transcription. And I was reading that part of the book, and I thought, geez, that would have been around the time when we spoke. I feel like that was, there's always more to the story that that you don't know. But
I've been, profoundly deaf for about 5 years. And I got a cochlear implant about 4 years ago. And a cochlear implant takes you from being deaf to having really lousy hearing. But it is a freaking miracle. If you think about it, they open up your head, they put in this wire. The wire is connected to your auditory nerve. And after 30 days, you can kind of hear, which is how we're doing this. Now, I'm having a live transcription of what you're saying. Sometimes I read it, but often I can just react, and I could not have done that. So, I'm not saying that I'm Beethoven, and just like Daniel Quayle is not saying he's JFK, but listen, if Beethoven can compose the Fifth Symphony, I can do a podcast while deaf.
On Brand will be right back after this.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Now, back to the show.
Are you using a rolled board where you just press a button and it's that?
You know, I wish that I had all of like the old DJ stuff. I do. I think I've got a hi-hat. There we go. So that's the extent of my, I need the ballpark crowd goes wild.
Do you have laughter?
No, I should get that. It should just plug in a laugh track like the Brady Bunch and make the whole show.
I use a Rodecaster, and they have several models, but they have like 8 or 10 buttons assigned to applause, laughter, background noise. I've never used it on my podcast.
I feel like I listen to a lot of podcasts and I don't hear that either. So I don't know where these features are coming from. Well, speaking of product features, you have to be, were you the first person ever with the title Chief Evangelist?
Well,
is there one before you?
Well, Jesus.
Right, of a commercial product.
Well, I don't know. This is prosperity ministry. That's a pretty commercial product.
This
right?
is true.
No, but the original meaning or the meaning of evangelism comes from a Greek word meaning bringing the good news. So Jesus brought the good news of eternal life. And then there was a 2,000-year gap. And then Guy brought the good news of Macintosh. I was actually the second software evangelist. So there was Jesus, then Mike Boych, then Guy Kawasaki.
Well, and that lineage continues because now I feel like you see this, the title everywhere, and you continue evangelizing for companies like Canva, Mercedes-Benz. Have you, in looking back on the work of evangelism, has it changed as brand building products, media have changed?
I mean, of course, things have to change because when I was evangelizing Macintosh back then, a cellular phone was defined as a 20-pound box in your trunk with a wire to a handset in the front of the car. If you were really cool, you had a fax machine. If you were really, really, really cool, you worked for Apple and you had an email system called Apple Link. So now, with the internet and social media and, various social media platforms, it's a very different game about how to reach people. Before it was, here's a gas card guy and, here's a bag, go evangelize Macintosh. And that's obviously very different now. But the concept that evangelism is bringing the good news, I think is the same. That, it's very easy to evangelize good news and it's very hard to evangelize crap. And that is not dependent on the technology.
Well, there's a great story in the book about your early Apple evangelism, and it makes me think of your 1776 23-cent price disparity, even though it was a bit of a different with the, what was it, a $5,000 expense cap, and you spent a little bit more for to evangelize.
Well, okay, so to this day, I claim innocence of any guilt or any malfeasance in that deal. So I was working for a guy named Mike Murray. He was the director of marketing of the Macintosh division. And the problem was that even though there was now software, most people believed that there was no software for Macintosh. So if you bought a Macintosh, you would, I don't know, just be staring at the Finder and maybe Mac Paint and Mac Write. So he said, Guy, we got to start with our own house. We have to start with our sales force and our dealers. They need to know that there's software. So I said, well, why don't we buy like a pack of software and give it to all the dealers and give it to the sales force? And so there would be like 10 really cool apps. And he said, yeah, it's a great idea. Go do it. So I go and do it. And, I got everybody down to rock bottom price. And for the quantities that we needed, it cost $750,000. But, Mike Murray said, do it. So I did it. And then come to find out, my spending limit was $5,000. So I was a mere $745,000 over budget. And there are several versions of this that Steve Jobs wanted to fire me because I went so far over budget. Certainly the CFO did. on the other hand, it worked. So
And so I think that's the big part of the story. When you were last here, we talked about your evangelism work, and you did a great job of kind of connecting the dots of companies like Apple, Wikipedia, Canva, in terms of democratizing information, democratizing design with Canva. I wonder, and I think I'm legally bound as a podcast host to ask about AI, does AI fit into this democratization of things story when we talk about access and creativity?
Well, listen, you will not find a bigger believer in AI than Guy. I love AI. I think AI is a bigger deal than the internet, than social media, than all this stuff. And I use AI literally every day, every day. Now, when I'm writing a book and I have to ask a question like, let's see. I can ask a question like, how many devices does Signal allow you to link to? And, obviously you could have done that with a search engine pre-AI, but if you had just Googled that pre-AI, you would have gotten 250,000 links, and you would have to watch 5 YouTube videos and read 5, Reddits and, whatever. And now ChatGPT or Gemini says the limit for Signal is 5 devices. And I use this every day like this for fact checking. Now, I also know that AI hallucinates, so I have to fact check the facts. But I think that people, they have very selective memory. They say, AI has hallucinations and it makes shit up. And my response to that is, as opposed to your human sources who never make shit up and they're always right? I mean, what's the difference?
Well, and I think even with Wikipedia, you see a struggle. Someone can make something up and edit an entry there. So it does seem like it's part of that kind of tapestry of information.
Well, I mean, if you understand that AI is built on human intelligence, and human intelligence makes shit up and lies and are crooks, what do you think AI is going to be? And, I guess, listen, I don't know where you fall politically, but I mean, here's a very simple question, which is, if you're trying to decide if you should give your baby vaccination, you can either ask ChatGPT what you should do or ask Robert F. Kennedy Jr. go ahead, take a few moments, decide who you're going to ask and who you're going to believe. I mean, wow.
Yeah. And you talking about stories to kind of reflect on in life too, and you make an interesting point. You brought up politics. But you do in the book too, and I think it's important because you ask a similar question, looking through the lens of our children and grandchildren at a point where you might wonder where Guy stood, where Nick stands, where someone else that might be talking about themselves in the third person right now stands. But you drew a pretty clear line in the sand, and and that's not nothing either, because you had a lot of followers on various platforms, but I love that you not only tell that story, but you tell the full story. And it makes me think of the evangelism story of, well, it worked because there was a similar conclusion there. There wasn't a great exodus in the followers of Guy Kawasaki.
Well, I mean, about, I think it was 2016, I was in Germany. This is another story from the book. I was in Germany. I had dinner with two friends in Germany, in Berlin, and they said, Guy, to this day, we ask our parents and our grandparents, how did Hitler take over Germany? How could you let somebody that evil take over our country? And they said to me, Guy, you are now 1930 Germany is 2016 America. And someday, if your grandchild asks you, Dad or Granddad or Grandpa, did you resist fascism when it was trying to take over America? What are you going to say, Guy? And that's the day I sort of decided to go all in, supporting Hillary Clinton, supporting Kamala Harris, supporting Joe Biden, because at the end of my life, when my grandchild or children ask me, did you resist fascism? Grandpa is going to say, you damn straight I did.
Well, it's interesting too, because I feel like that was a Jane Fonda speech recently where, she talked about how people talk a lot about where were you when X, Y, and Z happened. And she pointed out this is one of those moments that
Yes.
that people will be asking about. So
yeah, for sure. And one of my disappointments is that there's a lot of tech influencers and social influencers, and they steer clear of this topic, right? And their logic is, well, my followers not following me for political information, and I don't want to lose followers. I don't want to lose promotional opportunities, blah, blah, blah. Well, I tell you something, if America turns into Nazi Germany, man, there's going to be a lot of lack of promotional opportunities, and there's going to be,
if you want to make it about that, then sure. Yeah. Then we'll be without a lot of,
it's going to be a very different world. And you can say, but you can say to your grandchildren, but I never lost any followers.
Yeah. Granddad, tell us about your followers again. Doesn't seem like we will have really run out of things to talk about at that point. Well, as someone that is a brand evangelist, I would imagine that you have no shortage of brands that have made you smile recently. And I wonder, Guy, what is a brand that has you smiling lately?
Well, how long do you have? I mean,
what do you got?
Yeah, you want only the positive, or you want the positive? And
I always, whenever anybody asks a follow-up question, I say it can be a legitimate, like laughing out loud smile, or it can be a shaking my head, I can't believe they did that smile. So it's chef's choice.
Well, I will say that, and I almost feel trailing edge about saying this because so many people cite them now. But man, I was an early adopter. I love what Liquid Death has done, right? So Liquid Death sells you water in a can, and you feel good about buying water in a can, and because you're not adding to plastic, and you're not adding to your body's sugar content, and all of that, like, so good. But I know deep down inside, how much carbon dioxide did I contribute by buying a can of water that had to go across the country and come to me, right? So, there is that factor, but and the fact that they called it Liquid Death, and their mantra is kill thirst. And when I came out with a book called Think Remarkable, I loved what Liquid Death was doing, so I made the mantra of our marketing: kill mediocrity. So yeah, I would say Liquid Death is definitely in that category. In the opposite side, I will also say that Apple Computer, my dearly beloved Apple, drives me crazy sometimes. Just, well, I mean, at many levels, from giving glass and gold trophies to having an insufficient number of ports on your laptop, to the way system settings and system preferences is a frickin' Tolstoy novel that to try to figure out. And when you, like, as a podcaster, I really cannot have my iPhone going off in the middle of an interview, right? And
Yeah.
so I mean, seriously, if you wanted to ensure, now I cannot really turn off my phone, because if something goes wrong, you need to be able to call me, or my producer needs to be able to call me and say, Guy, you're muted, or, whatever, right? And so I shouldn't really turn it off. So I know, okay, so do I put it on airplane mode? Do I put it on do not disturb? But then you have your emergency contacts can pierce the do not disturb, and my producer is probably one of my emergency contacts. And so, by the time you figure that all out and silence your phone, the minute your podcast ends, you say to yourself, no, how do I reverse this? How does this phone now ring for everybody? How do I get notifications from Signal and messages? And it takes a week to figure out how to silence your phone. It takes a week to figure out how to now put your phone back to normal. So then I bought a Faraday bag, and I just put the phone in the Faraday bag. But sometimes, I swear to God, Apple Computer pierces the Faraday bag, and my phone rings in the Faraday bag. And this is an example of, my God, if you have to write a book about how to silence your phone for a podcast, probably something is not right there.
Well, there's a little bit of friction. And to take people further behind the curtain, because I too struggle with this very thing. That's why setting on my Mac right here is a sticky note that says close messages, mail, and phone face down. So that's how I've solved it, because the emergency contacts, my kids are in there, and if they kind of think everything's an emergency. So just face down on the desk here is about the best that I can do.
Or you can buy a Faraday bag.
That too, but it sounds like even that is penetrable sometimes.
I one day I was in search of the ultimate Faraday bag, and I have these 50 caliber ammo cans. The kind you can buy from. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I will tell you right now, if you put your iPhone in a 50 caliber ammo can, it's not a Faraday can.
No, I could see that going the other way. In fact, so as we wrap up, where can we go to send folks to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Well, actually, I will say that I would rather you go to my podcast and learn from the 300 remarkable people than you go to GuyKawasaki.com. Now, GuyKawasaki.com exists. You can search for my name on Amazon and buy my books and blah, blah, blah. But I'll tell you something, that I think my podcast is the best work I've ever done in my career. It's also the least appreciated work that I've done in my career. I haven't figured that out yet. Why? But if from the outside looking in, trying to be somewhat objective, if you wanted to learn the most from Guy, you would listen to my podcast at this point. I truly do believe that. And, that's free. And when you listen to my podcast, much like this podcast was, that about 90% of the time it's the guest talking and 10% it's me. So this is not, Joe Rogan 4 hours, 3.5 hours is Joe Rogan, 0.5 hours is the guest. This is 90-10 the other way.
So follow-up question, if someone's listening and thinks, oh, well, I don't know that I have listened to Guy's podcast. Is there an episode you'd tell folks to jump in on that you're especially proud of in that history?
Well, the good news and bad news about my podcast is that it is all over the map. And so, if it was just political figures, Guy's podcast, or just science figures, Guy's podcast, or just, athletes, Guy podcast, but it's not that at all. And I'm just all over the map. So if you want athletic, remarkable people, I have Ronnie Lott and Christy Yamaguchi. Yesterday, I interviewed someone who was the former director of the CDC. And so, if you're into medical advice, I have the Surgeon General, I have former CDC, I have the guy who ran the Human Genome Project. And so it's, on the other hand, if you love nature, I have Jane Goodall. If you love science, I have Neil deGrasse Tyson. If you like writing, I have Margaret Atwood. I mean, I got to say, with all modesty aside, I really have great guests.
And I'm not going to spoil the book, because you listing those guests made me think of the first one that dropped an F-bomb, and it's not who folks think, but we're going to let that.
It's not Gary V. In case you thought that's who it would be. No.
Well, again, coming full circle to that bit of gratitude you started the show off with, and not wanting to be late with it myself, Guy, thank you for being on brand with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and I'll take my phone out of the Faraday bag and just go on with my life now.
Awesome. And I'll flip mine back over.
All right. All the best to you.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennica Watkins-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennica, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennicawatkins-porter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketing marketingpodcasts.net or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.